They thought she was dead, poisoned by a perfect alien toxin, left lifeless on a moon at the edge of space. But neutralized wasn't just a soldier. She was a scientist with a body that didn't follow the rules. 6 hours later, she woke up. And in silence, she walked into their base, not for revenge, but to teach a lesson the galaxy would never forget. This isn't a story of survival, it's a story of control, calculation, and one human rewriting the script. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The Kravox Dominion, known for its obsession with order and efficiency, had spent years trying to understand humans. Most alien species saw humans as unpredictable, either too reckless to survive or too stubborn to be ignored. In endless meetings and simulations, their leaders debated the same question over and over. Were humans a threat, or just a temporary glitch in galactic history? That answer became a priority when human forces established a small outpost on the edge of Dominion-controlled space. It was called Outstation Ember, and it was quiet, remote, and barely worth noticing, except for one thing. It sat near 3 major trade routes, and its sensors kept a watchful eye on everything that passed by. Outstation Ember wasn't impressive. It was a cluster of gray metal modules attached to a rocky moon that had no atmosphere and even less charm. The only human stationed there full-time was neutralized, a tactical engineer and systems analyst with a background in biochemical research. She liked the silence, she liked the distance, and most of all, she liked being away from Earth's political noise. While most engineers worked in teams and followed instructions, Nira preferred working alone, following patterns, solving problems, and writing in her old leather notebook, something most people her age had never used. She had once been a rising star in Earth's scientific community, but instead of accepting a prestigious research role, she joined the military. People called it a waste of potential. She called it freedom. Back in Dominion space, the decision had been made. The human presence at Ember was to be removed, not by battle, but by science. The Dominion believed in smart warfare, in solving problems with precision. They had developed a new airborne compound specifically tailored to human biology. It was colorless, odorless, and targeted the nervous system directly. Within minutes of exposure, the victim would be paralyzed, then lose consciousness, and finally the body would shut down completely. A peaceful, painless end, at least by alien standards. Tech Officer Spurnex, the alien specialist in charge of the operation, was confident. His team had tested the compound in simulation after simulation. According to every result, there was no chance of failure. But there was one flaw in their plan. None of them had ever tested it on an actual human. That part was considered unnecessary. The delivery method was simple. A palm-sized drone, disguised to look like standard maintenance equipment, would release the toxin into the air near the station's external sensor grid. Based on her routine schedule, Nira would be checking that grid early in the day. The toxin would enter her breathing system through a small fault they had secretly introduced in her mask filter. She would collapse quietly. The recovery team would arrive 6 hours later to collect the body and remove any traces. No one would ever know what happened. It was, as Spurnex described it, a perfect operation. That morning, Nira stepped out onto the rocky surface of the moon. She moved slowly but confidently across the jagged path between modules, her boots kicking up gray dust that fell quickly in the low gravity. Her environmental suit reflected the pale light from the nearby gas giant. As always, she started her inspection at Sensor Array 7B. The panel was slightly off, just enough to make her frown. She leaned in, activated her tools, and began her work. Above her, hovering silently, was the drone. Inside the drone, a small sensor confirmed her identity. The sequence began. 3 seconds later, a faint mist escaped into the air, invisible in the moon's low-pressure environment. Nira blinked. She felt a strange chill behind her eyes. She coughed once, reached out for balance, and then fell, her body folding in on itself with quiet urgency. Her tools clattered against the surface. Her breathing slowed. then stopped. In the forward command center, several kilometers away, the Dominion officers watched the feed in silence. A green light blinked on the screen. Target neutralized. Spearnex let out a satisfied hiss and received nods of approval from his team. They celebrated with efficiency, quick, muted gestures that spoke of pride and relief. Their job was done. No one noticed the flicker of life still registering faintly on the drone's system. The signal was small, unstable, but still there. Neera's mind had not shut down. It had changed direction. Inside her body, the compound was met not with surrender, but resistance. Neera's biology, already unusual from years of exposure to alien materials during her research days, did not respond the way it was expected to. Her immune system, shaped by experimentation, training, and genetic quirks, didn't collapse. It adapted. Slowly, stubbornly, her body began to fight back. Her blood produced enzymes it wasn't supposed to know how to make. Her nervous system rerouted signals. Her cells began neutralizing the toxin molecule by molecule, building immunity in real time. What was meant to be a silent death became instead a strange form of healing sleep. Her brain drifted between dream and memory, recalling chemical structures and formulas, reviewing alien compounds like she was taking a late-night exam back in school. In a strange, foggy corner of her mind, she could hear her mother's voice reading medical journals out loud, something she'd always done when Neera was too young to understand the words, but too curious to ignore them. Hours passed. The alien camp prepared their recovery team. They expected to find a quiet, cold body and nothing more. What they would find instead was something completely unexpected. The mistake they had made wasn't the toxin. It wasn't the drone or the method of delivery. It was something far simpler and far more dangerous. They had assumed that humans were predictable. They had assumed wrong. Neera Talon was not dead. Though her body lay still on the cold surface of the moon, her mind was far from silent. Inside her, a quiet war was being fought, one that no Dominion officer could see or measure. The alien toxin that had been carefully designed to end her life had instead sent her into a deep, chaotic sleep, a space between dreaming and remembering, where logic twisted and memories floated by like stray signals in deep space. She wasn't aware of time in the normal sense. Moments stretched and folded into each other. She stood in a classroom from years ago, watching molecules form in midair. Equations danced across the walls. Her father stood nearby, explaining enzyme reactions, his voice blending with the hum of the station's life support. Then she was in a lab again, younger, testing alien samples under microscopes too advanced for their time. These memories weren't just memories. They were tools. Her subconscious picked them apart, analyzing the structure of the compound that had brought her down. Somewhere in that fog of thought she saw it clearly, a flaw, a minor one but enough. The alien chemical was designed to overwhelm the average human body, not hers. Neera had spent years working with foreign substances, often exposing herself to strange compounds during her research. Her body had learned, had changed. It was like it had been training for this moment all along. As the compound moved through her bloodstream, her system began to respond. Not with panic, but with adjustment. White blood cells swarmed. Enzymes activated. Her liver, enhanced by an old gene therapy trial she had nearly forgotten, began to break down the invader faster than anyone could have predicted. While her body worked, her mind wandered deeper. She imagined the Dominion scientists standing over a table discussing formulas proud of their creation. They had probably never even considered running a live test. Too confident, too sure of their simulations. In her dream, Neera laughed, softly, bitterly. Science without testing wasn't science. It was guessing. And they had guessed wrong. Back at the alien forward base, Tech Officer Spearnex reviewed the mission status with confidence. The drone had reported success. The recovery team, led by Lieutenant Christian, was preparing to retrieve the human remains for analysis. Their plan had gone exactly as expected. But Spearnex didn't know that the drone's biosensor had continued to blink faintly even after its report. A single line of data, buried deep in the system, showed irregular life signs. It was ignored. An error, they thought, a glitch, nothing important. Nira's body, still lying near the sensor array, shifted slightly. Her fingers twitched. Her pulse, weak but steady, was slowly gaining strength. Inside her mind, the dreams were changing. She was no longer drifting through old lessons. Now, she was assembling pieces, constructing a mental map of what had happened. The toxin, the drone, the way her body had responded. Every detail was being filed away, examined, and understood. She wasn't just recovering. She was preparing. At hour 4, her breathing returned to normal. By hour 5, her vision fluttered behind closed eyes. At hour 6, Nira Talon opened her eyes. The world was blurry at first. Lights blinked slowly across the surface of the station, and the emergency beacon on her suit pulsed a steady red. Her head ached, and her throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sand, but she was alive. She pushed herself into a sitting position, groaning as her muscles complained. For a moment, she just sat there, breathing deeply. Then she saw the melted remains of the drone lying near her. She picked it up, examining the warped metal. This wasn't standard equipment. It had been tampered with, modified. The memories, returned in full. What she had seen, what she had felt, how she had collapsed. The mist, the feeling of something foreign in her lungs. Her mind snapped into focus. This wasn't an accident. It was an assassination attempt. And someone out there thought they had succeeded. She checked her suit's internal systems and confirmed what she already suspected. She had been unconscious for almost exactly 6 hours. That meant the recovery team would be arriving soon, expecting a corpse. A plan started forming in her mind. Quick, sharp, efficient. Nira stood, her legs still shaky, and returned to the station. Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it. Organized chaos, tools neatly aligned, her notebook lying open to a half-finished sketch of a sensor array. She moved quickly now, grabbing her toolkit, checking her customized gear, and unlocking. The private storage compartment her commanding officer pretended didn't exist. Inside were tools she wasn't technically allowed to have, modified tech, unauthorized compounds, and equipment she'd designed herself. She wasn't angry, not yet. What she felt was clarity. Someone had tried to end her life with science. She would respond in kind. Not with rage, with data, with precision. As she loaded the pieces of her plan into a small satchel, Nira's expression was calm, almost thoughtful. The Dominion had tried to eliminate her quietly. They had underestimated her adaptability, her knowledge, and her will. They had used science against her. Now she would use science to make a point. Not just to the recovery team, but to every alien officer who believed that humans could be handled like a problem with a simple solution. They had made a mistake. They had chosen the wrong human. Nira Talon moved through the moon's jagged terrain like a shadow. Her suit, now modified with bits of reflective material and tiny heat regulators, blended into the dusty environment. She had always believed in using what was available, and right now that meant using the harsh surface of the moon as her ally. The rocks, the thin geysers of methane that occasionally burst from underground vents, and the constant low light were all working in her favor. Every step she took was calculated, slow, and silent. This wasn't a sprint. It was a game of patience. The alien forward base lay several kilometers away, nestled in a flat crater surrounded by sensor towers and shielded power modules. From above, it looked like a well-organized colony, full of straight lines and clean paths. But to Nira, it was a collection of flaws waiting to be noticed. She had studied alien architecture for years. Kravok's Dominion structures were built for efficiency, not creativity. Their patrols were timed, their systems were rigid, and their security was based on the belief that enemies would attack directly. That worked fine for armies, not so well against one human with a plan. As she crept forward, Nira reached the ridge that overlooked the base. She lay flat behind a tall slab of stone and watched. 2 Kravok's guards paced along the southern fence, their movements robotic, Every 18 seconds they turned. Every 12 steps they paused. Between each patrol there was a clear gap. 14 seconds where no one was watching the fence on the southeast side. Nira smiled to herself. Predictability was comforting, for the lazy. She waited until a cloud of methane burst from a vent behind the base, rising in a twisting fog. In those few seconds of visual interference, she moved, fast and low. Her suit's heat signature mimicked the local rock mice, small animals known for curling up against heat vents. Alien sensors, which were tuned to ignore those creatures, showed nothing unusual. Nira slipped through the gap, landing behind a small storage unit. She was inside. Her first objective was disruption, not destruction. She didn't want to set off alarms or start a battle. She wanted confusion. She wanted the aliens to question everything they thought they knew. She pulled a small box from her satchel and placed it behind the unit. It beeped once, soft and low, then began to release a harmless compound into the air, one that would cause minor dizziness in Kravox officers. Not enough to be dangerous, but just enough to make them second-guess their balance. She moved on to the next point. In all, she planted 5 devices, one near the guard barracks, one beside the power supply conduits, another in the communications relay, and the last inside a waste recycling chute she accessed by prying open a poorly secured maintenance panel. Each device served a different purpose. Some altered environmental readings, others sent out false data, and one created a high-frequency hum only Kravox personnel could hear. It would drive them just slightly crazy without them understanding why. As she worked, she remained invisible, hiding behind corners, slipping between shadows, freezing whenever a patrol passed by. Her heartbeat stayed steady, her breathing calm. This was her element. Not war, but control. A slow, steady undoing of systems built too confidently. Her most dangerous target was the environmental controls. They were housed inside a dome-shaped structure near the center of the base. 2 guards stood outside, but Nira wasn't interested in the front door. She circled the building, finding a service hatch halfway buried in rock. It was sealed with a biometric scanner designed for Kravox signatures. Luckily, Nira had prepared for that. She pulled out a small vial of synthesized pheromones. A single drop on the sensor confused it just long enough to unlock the panel. She slid inside. The interior was humming with machines. Screens flashed with readings in a language she had spent years decoding. She made careful adjustments, nothing obvious but enough to shift oxygen levels in certain rooms, making some colder, some warmer, and others just slightly humid. All harmless, all annoying. Within an hour, the base would feel strange to everyone inside it. And strange meant distracted. Her final move before leaving was the communication system. On the underside of a service console, she attached a small device she'd built herself. It would slowly degrade the clarity of outgoing signals, scrambling voices and introducing delay. It would take hours for anyone to even notice it was there. By then, it would be too late. As she exited through the same service hatch, Nira checked her time. 27 minutes until the recovery team would arrive at the location where she had died. She needed to be back in place before they found nothing and raised the alarm. She retraced her path across the base perimeter, timing her movements with the patrol patterns. Each step was deliberate. She stopped twice to hide from unexpected movements, once even lying completely still while a tall alien technician passed within arm's reach. It took all her willpower not to flinch as its strange, translucent skin rippled in shifting colors of blue and green. Finally, she reached the outer edge of the base and slipped back through the same 14-second gap in the patrol coverage. By the time she returned to her outpost, she was coated in a fine layer of moon dust, her energy fading, but her mind sharp. She climbed back into the station and quickly returned to the spot near the sensor array where she had collapsed. She lay down again, adjusting her position just slightly, and waited. She knew they were coming, and she wanted to be there when they realized the human they had tried to kill had walked into their base, planted chaos in every corner, and walked out again without a trace. This was more than payback. It was a message, one they wouldn't understand right away, but when they did, it would change everything. The recovery team arrived right on time. 6 Dominion officers in full environmental suits stepped carefully onto the rocky surface near the human outpost. Their orders were clear: collect the body, gather any equipment, and return before anyone noticed. They approached the sensor array where Nira Talon had fallen. The readings were strange. Life signs had briefly appeared and then vanished. One officer scanned the area, frowning behind his helmet. There was no body, just a set of scattered tools and the burned remains of their drone. Before he could call it in, a sound echoed across the comms. Short, sharp, unmistakable. Laughter. Human laughter. At that moment, back at the Dominion base, strange things began to happen. Lights flickered. Air filters hummed unevenly. Several officers felt a sudden shift in air pressure, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Commander Yalen Cruz stormed into the command center, antenna twitching in frustration. "What is going on?" he barked. His staff stumbled over each other with updates: minor power disruptions, odd chemical readings, small systems behaving strangely. One technician tried to adjust a settings panel only for the screen to flash a single word: "Hello." In another room, a guard slipped on a freshly polished floor and crashed into a supply crate. The floor hadn't been polished. It had been altered by one of Nira's compounds, making it just slick enough to cause problems. In the medbay, the staff discovered all their nutrient supplies had been replaced with flavored substitutes that caused extreme drowsiness. Nothing was broken, nothing was deadly, but everything was wrong. The base, once a model of alien precision, now felt unstable. The command center, just as Yalen tried to regain order, every screen turned black. Then, in silent unison, they lit up again. A single sentence appeared on each display, written in perfect Dominion script. "Knock knock." The room froze. Yalen took a step forward, his voice caught in his throat. "What is this?" A soft hiss came from the main door as it slid open. Standing in the entryway was Nira Talon, alive, calm, and very, very real. She stepped into the room without a weapon in her hand, but with the weight of quiet confidence. Her suit was dusty from the terrain, and her expression was unreadable. The guards raised their weapons, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she looked around at the blinking consoles and stunned officers. "You poisoned me," she said matter-of-factly. "That was rude." No one moved. "I mean, I get it," she continued, walking slowly toward the central console. "You thought it would be clean, simple. You had your data, your simulations, your perfect little toxin." She looked at Yalen. "But you made one mistake. You thought humans always respond the same way." Yalen tried to speak, but she raised a finger, stopping him. "You didn't test it. You didn't study us enough, and worst of all," she said, her tone growing colder, "you assumed one death wouldn't matter." She tapped her wrist device. Across the base, her hidden tools activated, not with explosions, but with information. Data streamed into the Dominion's internal network, recordings of the base's layout, logs of security weaknesses, personal communications between high-ranking officers discussing unauthorized side projects. It was all now being transmitted to the Dominion's Central Command. "You'll find all the reports in your system now," she said, looking at the stunned technicians. 13 major security failures, 42 violations of protocol, and one plan to reroute military funds for personal experiments. "Congratulations, you've just made history." Spurnex, the scientist behind the toxin, stumbled forward. You should be dead." Nira gave a half-smile. "That's the second mistake. You believed a single chemical could define an entire species." She took another step forward. "My body adapted. I recovered, and I learned from it." Yalen's face shifted from shock to fury. "You invaded a military base. That is an act of war." "War?" Nira tilted her head. "You tried to assassinate me during routine maintenance." "I'm not here for war. I'm here to give you something far more valuable." She reached into her bag and tossed a small chip onto the main console. "That's the antidote. and detailed notes on how to improve your science. Call it a professional courtesy. No one moved to pick it up. I didn't kill anyone, she added. I could have, I didn't. This was a lesson. Learn from it. She turned toward the door, then paused. Next time, if you want to talk to a human, try asking. We make better company than corpses. And with that, she walked out. The door closed behind her, and for several moments the command center remained completely silent. Yelen's antennae slowly lowered. Spurnex looked at the chip, then at the empty door. Across the room, screens continued to flash data. Real data. Evidence that couldn't be buried. 3 days later, the Dominion announced a quiet withdrawal from the contested sector, calling it a strategic redeployment. No official mention was made of the human at Outstation Ember. But across Dominion, space, one name began circulating in private messages and quiet reports. Nira Talon. Back at her outpost, Nira returned to her maintenance work. The array needed recalibrating. She moved slowly, still tired, but with a sense of peace. She had made her point. The stars above her glittered in silence, and for the first time in days, everything felt calm again. Sometimes, the most powerful tool wasn't a weapon or a machine. It was the simple refusal to play by someone else's rules.